All right, today we've got a little bit different of a subject matter. We're going to be a lot more tactical today.
Yeah.
So instead of very strategic, we're going to be very tactical today. So we're actually going to talk about SMS, and I'm gonna let Cody take the lead on it because they're doing a lot of very cool things on SMS that we're not necessarily doing, but I want to do right. And we definitely didn't do them at Legacy. So we'll kind of go back and forth here, but SMS for me is really cool because it's like you don't have all the IP issues and all kinds of other stuff that we're definitely going to get
Well,
into. So
that's why we did it, right?
yeah,
Like we had our email deliverability tanked and we had to rely on that. Like, so it wasn't like we were like, oh, we predicted it was going to be this huge lever for the business. It was out of necessity, right? We are like, okay, instead of having 3,000 clicks, we now have 300 clicks on an email, a tenth of what we had, right?
yep.
And so you got to get creative, and SMS, like it forced us to get really, really good at SMS because it was like one of the few levers we still had. Because the thing is, when your email deliverability goes low, you actually have to do less to get back to where you were, right? So instead of doing 300 clicks, you ultimately were doing 150 to get back to 3,000. So
Okay, so awesome. So let's talk about that though, because like one way that people get people on their SMS list is they send out an email and ask them to
yeah,
join the SMS list.
yeah,
If they're not getting clicks in the email, it kind of defeats the purpose. So how did you guys really build your SMS list?
yeah. I mean, obviously, when you're an established business, it makes it a little bit easier because it was already a part of like our buyer file, right? When you bought a product from us, you opted into SMS, and it was all part of that.
Got it. You just
We
weren't
didn't
using
really
it.
utilize it as effectively as we probably could have before, or definitely not as we are now. So we had a first movers advantage. It's not like we were starting from zero there, right? We had a list we could tap into, but you know, the other thing is we built acquisition funnels around SMS being the thing. And so like while most of the knowledge that, the business gurus or whatever today will teach you is like, oh, you'll ruin your conversion rate by making SMS mandatory. We were forced into making SMS
Yeah.
mandatory, right? Otherwise,
Yeah.
like the email was worth 1/10 of what the SMS was, right? So
Well,
we
and
could
we
afford to spend 10
yeah.
times more dollars on a SMS lead as we could an email lead. It makes it a lot, like I said, it's almost like forced compliance of like just making it mandatory.
And that makes sense. Like there are times I just had a call this week with the Facebook specialist and he's like, "Look,
Yeah.
you can go through stuff that he's like, I've got clients that we spend $150 on a lead, right?" And he
That's a
goes,
lot for a lead.
"Yeah, but he goes, we pre-qualify it. It's a highly qualified
Got
lead,
it.
and almost every lead converts into ultimately into a paid subscriber." He goes, "I have other clients that we can I knock that same client all the way down to 30 cents a lead, but we're going after a bunch of shit that's unqualified, and you just hope that ultimately when it adds all up."
Right. It's friction's a great word
Yeah.
for this, right? You increase the amount of friction it takes to become a lead,
Yeah.
or you make it super easy.
Or like in your case, you ask for more boxes. We all know that the more boxes you ask for on the opt-in page,
Yeah.
the lower the conversion rate. That's just a natural fact, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't ask for more boxes, right? Which is everybody's like, "Oh, the goal of the page is the highest conversion rate." Well, not necessarily.
Right. Well, it's one of the numbers we always talk about, lifetime value. That's the goal, right?
Yeah, how much money you're going to make.
If you spend, we just recently were looking at our lead LTV and we noticed one source and one funnel, we're spending $5, a CPL of $5 to get a lead from them. And we were converting something like 65% of them to SMS opt-in, which is ridiculous, ridiculously good. And at 90 days, I think it was, they were worth $50 to us. I'm rounding up. It's like 48 and 72 cents, whatever. Right. But when you get almost a 10x LTV on that lead within the first 3 months, right? Like it's one of those moments where you just want to hit yourself over the head and you're like, why weren't we doing more of this 90
Exactly.
days
And maybe
ago?
you can't, right? Like
Right.
maybe you are maxed out on that lead source. That was one of the cool things, kind of back to the Facebook dude, is that he's like, "Look, at the end of the day, I don't care about any of the crap everybody else does. I don't care about likes and smiley faces and views and like all
Yeah.
the." He's like,
How many followers you
I just
have.
care like ROAS." He's like, "How much should we spend? How much should we make? At what period of time? And does it meet your goal?" Like he's like, "That's it. That's really what it should come down to." I'm like, "Exactly." like
It's
whether it's Facebook or anywhere else.
Yeah, it's
But
the one number that matters the most on the scoreboard. Like you can show timeouts, you can show, how many people are on base, whatever, right? But the fact is, all that matters is how many runs did
yeah,
you score,
how
right?
much
How many
money?
touchdowns did
Yeah,
you get? It's
how
like
much
that's the
money came in
one
the
true
business?
number. So,
Awesome. So let's go back to SMS, right?
yeah,
Like so clearly the first lesson is don't wait until you need SMS in order to build your list, right?
don't do what we
If
did.
your email list is still as very effective, like build an SMS at the same time. But the second thing is like, okay, well then how do you do that, right? Like
Yeah.
how do you get people on your SMS list if they're not there already?
I mean, like anything else, right? Like what you're offering has to be more valuable than them not wanting the text message from you.
Yeah.
Right? Just like the email. So, anyways, like it's got to be more valuable, just like in the email, right? The thing is that people are much more willing to give up an email because it's way easier to just unsubscribe, whatever, right? Opt out, and all that. An SMS, like that's someone's phone number, and they're far more, like worried about who has that. And they
Yeah.
don't want everyone in the world sending them a text message or calling them. So you have to like up the ante on what you're providing to make it worth. And that's what like a 65% opt-in rate's ridiculous. Well, the value proposition we offer is ridiculous, right? You're giving them, highly valuable paid content for free. So that way you can deliver on that value gap. And then like over time you
Yeah.
give yourself permission to ask for that sale, to ask for that dollar over a period of time. It doesn't happen all at once.
So it's just like getting somebody to give you their email,
Yeah.
right? Like there's got to be a value proposition on the page, and ultimately what's on the page has to be more valuable than the email address. What is interesting though is I think as time has gone on, it's easier and easier to get people to give you the phone number as a cell number than
Well,
it used to be.
I'll tell you one of the big things too is autofill on your computer or whatever, right? When you type in your name on
Oh yeah.
something, generally it's you can click to autofill all the rest of the information, right?
Yep.
That's pretty convenient for 99% of people. Well, when it's there, if you hit enter, sometimes it'll autofill for you. Like there's certain
Yeah.
buttons you can hit. So autofill has been a huge factor in reducing the friction because they don't have to write out their phone number. They
Yeah.
don't have to write out
Makes
their
sense.
email. It autofills it for you, and they choose whether they actually want to submit with it or not at the end of the day, right? We always talk about they're adults. They get to do whatever they want. But that's one of the reasons, my belief at least, is why SMS is easier to get now than it was even 5 years ago.
Okay, cool. So, all right. So now we're down the path, right? We figured out, okay, we're going to get their email address. We come up with some value proposition, right? Something that gets them to do it. Do you tend to try to get people to reply to that text message? Do you just start sending text messages? They got to click links. Like, what do you typically do?
So there's two sides of this. There's what you should do for marketing, and there's what you have to do legally for compliance.
Yeah.
Right. And we can get into the weeds. Like,
I don't want to get into the weeds.
yeah,
Like, what do
because
you
you got
do?
short codes
Do
and
you-
high frequency
Yeah,
toll
exactly.
numbers.
Yeah, whatever. Like, there's 1,000 ways to do text, but what do you think's more effective to try to get them to interact with you or just click on links?
I think it's almost the same as email. Of like, if you get someone to reply to an email, it does a lot of positive things for your deliverability, whatever. You don't get any of that upside on the SMS, but what you do get is to become like a trusted sender, right?
Yep.
And so when you send something and they reply to it, now it doesn't show like all the nonsense. iOS recently implemented this thing. If someone's SMSing you a bunch and it's one-sided, it's like, underneath it'll be like, do you want to mark this as junk or whatever?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean anything from you, like from the carrier side, but it just means they won't receive your SMS anymore. Sometimes.
Yeah.
It's very, like I said, it's very different, but that can be one way that they disengage with you. Well, if they reply to it, that stops showing up no matter how one-sided the conversation is.
Oh, really?
And so that's one good
Oh, that's
reason to
that's
get
a
a
cool little
reply.
trick.
But another thing too is just, again, it's friction, right? It's way easier to click a link than it is to sit there and write a message, especially if you're catching someone and hopefully nobody's doing this, but they're driving and whatever, right? Like,
Yeah.
you catch them at a time where they can't really sit there and actually spend 2 seconds on their phone, but they pull it up and they can click a link and then close it, and you're there, right? Like when they open it back up, you're what they see. So I think the reply to, you lose that, right? They're not seeing you when they click a link and pop up and it's now you're in
Yeah.
there, whatever. But again, the amount of friction is higher and you can make it conversational.
Okay.
So I would say my opinion is in general, one's not more important than the other. One's not more valuable than the other. I just think you use them in different ways. Same thing, like if you're trying to get someone to actively do something, right?
Yep.
And let's say you have an event that you would like them to attend. It's a virtual event, whatever, right? You can click the link, but then they got to opt in on the page.
Yeah.
Whereas if you do reply to, right, you're like, hey, if you're interested, reply, join, and I'll
Got
make
it.
sure you get all the details. It again, you add a little friction to remove some friction, and you just move it
Yeah. It's just a
around,
different.
right?
Yeah. Exactly. Moving their eyeballs around, trying different things.
But I think that by doing that, also you pattern disrupt. They can't just click a link, or they're not like they're expecting a link and there's nothing, and you're just saying, hey, reply this, and I'll give you this thing, or I'll do this, or you'll get this, whatever it may be.
For us, one of the things that SMS for us really was more, about the only spot we really used it was on webinars.
Yep.
And because, you can, 5 minutes ahead of time, right? You send all those notifications
Yeah,
to them, and
timeliness.
timeliness, right? Like same reason why a dentist office uses SMS, and
Yeah.
like remind you of an appointment that you agreed to attend, right? Um, but for us, one of the coolest things about it is, like, I almost could do away with all the other numbers and just look to see what size the SMS list was, because it was somebody who had either clicked a link or one clicked opt in, or it didn't really matter. But now when they went and put their phone number in, it was like a double opt in.
Right. It was
And then,
far more predictive.
yeah, farmer. And then again, you're sending them a text, right? You could see them on there. Like, we know lots of people would watch our webinars or watch our events on the phone, and then when they go to order, they'd log in on the computer,
Yep.
mostly because of the age group. And you could see it at the CTA, the number drop off and the number computer guys go up, right? Like,
Yeah.
it was kind of cool. But that was probably the main area we were using. But it sounds like you guys are using it in a bunch of places.
Yeah. I mean, we're using, like I said, it became a substitute for email.
Okay.
And what we do is we run a lot of live events every day. Like we're running 6, 8, 10 sometimes live events in a day. Well, when you're doing that, like you're talking about, that's timely, right? Like they've got
Yeah,
an
exactly.
hour and a half. There's no replays, there's no whatever. It's like, get in. If the information's valuable, you will benefit, right? If not, then like we're gonna take another angle, another stab at another thing that's going on. Um, and that's the thing, is each one's unique, each one's different. It's not like we're running the same thing and we have the same guy today. We are going to cover 8 times. No, like
Yeah.
you're approaching it dynamically. Well, that means you have unique messaging for all those. And so you send out 8 to 10 texts a day. You really have to have a good reason for people to stay on.
Yeah, exactly. Because
'Cause-
otherwise they'll hit stop and
Yeah, they reply
drop it.
stop, or they block you, or
Yep.
whatever. And that's the other things. People are like, oh, it's way harder to get off an SMS thing. You're like, compliance is super strict.
Yeah.
If you say stop, you're
That's
done.
it. It's it.
You're
Yeah,
done.
exactly. It is easy.
You don't get a chance to say, are you sure? Or do you just want to opt out of this one thing? No, you're done. Right. So that's why you have to be super effective with every message, and a good reason why. And that's why I think one of the reasons it might work better is, like, one, it's shorter. So it has to be punchier.
Yep.
Right. You can't pontificate. And two is that every time you send it, you have to have a good reason why. Otherwise, you're not going to have a list very long. Whereas on email, like, people can just ride into the sunset, right?
Yeah,
They just
exactly.
stop opening it.
Yeah. Stop
And
paying attention.
whereas on a text, like, it's far more annoying to get a text message, so you're far more likely to stop.
Yeah, that makes sense. And doing that many live events in a day, and them being truly live, right? Like,
Yeah.
not not pre-recorded,
No,
run
no,
as
no, no.
live, right? I'm in a really live event. Yeah, it makes sense that's probably a very valuable method of getting people on there because otherwise they look at their email. Like I don't look at my email nearly as often as I look at
Mhm.
my phone,
That's
right? So it's much
exactly
harder
it.
to get on.
Well, and you can do cool stuff too, like you talked about on, using text on webinars is you can go, "Hey, we're going live in an hour. We're live. Hey, we just started, don't miss this."
Yeah,
And someone doesn't open their email and see all three of those and they were in the past,
yeah,
right? Like you have a chance at every single one of those to get a meaningful bump in the amount of people who engage with that live event. And, again, then it comes down to you being really great at doing live events to get them to stay on because
yeah.
that's down
That makes
funnel,
sense.
obviously. But
Yeah, but at the end of the day, right, the whole point of somebody on your list is not is is really ultimately, right, they're on there to get value and you're on there to generate money, right?
yeah,
That's what you're in business for.
yep.
And so if all you're doing is sending to them and they're not either feeling like it's valuable or you're not generating money out of it, then what's the point?
I will say one of the ways too, that like what you're doing is valuable is when you have buyers that still come to those.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's how like, sometimes the speakers forum might get frustrated. They're like, the room was full of buyers. You're like, look, that's a good thing.
That is a
Yes,
good
there's
thing.
less opportunity for us to generate revenue. But the thing is, when you're suppressing buyers from these events and they still get on them anyways, like they
Yep.
find a way to get on them, that tells you what you're offering, the value you're offering is really high because like they're seeking that. And then, obviously your product has to be even more valuable. But my point is like, if someone likes that kind of whatever you're having them do after the SMS, if they're stuck on that step still, even after they're further down the list, that means that that's super valuable and you should incorporate that throughout more of your funnel.
Yeah, for sure. So in order to send a bunch of like 8 to 10 a day, which
Yeah.
is a ridiculous number,
Yeah, we're a little
clearly, yeah,
obnoxious.
clearly you're in, live events, timely stuff, right? Breaking news type stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but but outside of that, obviously you can use them for other things, like just driving to a pre-recorded message.
Yep.
You just can't send it to them 4 times every
Yeah.
day for the next 2 weeks.
Again, that's why it's like, if you're going to do that, you have to come with a different thing and then it fatigues far faster.
Yeah, exactly. Just
But
like any pre-recorded message would.
right, but I think that one one of the big benefits that is super discounted in SMS is I think it compounds the problem a lot of people have with the email. You heard this a lot, like, well, I don't want to bug people, or like, I'm one of the good guys.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
don't.
I only email once a week.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
you don't get spammed by me, and the fact is that again, going back, these are adults that
exactly.
literally stopped whatever they were doing, opted in, and said, "This is a problem big enough in my life. I will exchange some of my information so you can give me information." And if they stick around and they're consuming all of that,
Yeah.
like
It
it makes zero sense where you're like, "Oh, again, I was like it's obnoxious to someone who doesn't want it, but to someone who needs it, like it's it's almost necessary."
and I've heard this over and over again through the years, where they're like, "Well, my audience is too smart for that," or
Oh God.
all that type stuff, right? Like, and the reality is, CEOs of companies respond just like,
Mm-hmm.
the guy driving the truck.
Last
It's
time
the
I checked,
same
we're all
thing.
human.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same psychological triggers. It's the same stuff. Like there's no like, well, I got to talk. No, like
They didn't evolve, right?
exactly,
They actually went through a
exactly.
completely different process.
Exactly.
They were genetically bred to
Yeah.
not feel that way.
Yeah, they need 14 letter words, all of them in order like
Yeah.
it's just not the way it works, right? We all everybody carrying a cell phone sees the same general stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that utilizing SMS especially nowadays, like it's almost a requirement with all the difficulty of getting in inboxes and IP placement
Yeah.
and all the other stuff that's going on, right? For a business, it's almost like you need to be, if you're not working on it, you need to be working on it. And there's
Yep.
lots of services like Call Loop and all kinds of other places that you could build a small list and text on a small general scale. Um,
Now, I will say though that like what I think that's one of the positive things though is they're adding more friction to email again. More friction is more value. Yeah, I mean, so they're adding friction back to email,
yep.
and so it'll in the cycle it'll come back and be more valuable, right? Like just like I think
Yeah, exactly.
during this
Exactly.
election cycle, everyone got so much mail
Oh, geez.
that now probably desensitized to direct mail a little
And there was
bit.
a lot, right? I mean, we were in a state with a highly contested
Yeah.
Senate seat,
Yeah.
right? And so I think each candidate spent like $20 million, and it wasn't uncommon to get 3 or 4 different messages every
The
single
same day.
every
The
single
same
day. It was
day.
ridiculous.
And talk about like that's not one you can opt out of.
No.
You know, like
and we're back here like, in the middle of nowhere in Montana, like
Yeah.
Cody likes to say, right? Like we're in a county of 3,000 people. And it's funny because we're still in a county that sometimes the mail guy delivers the wrong mail to the wrong person.
yeah.
And so sometimes we get the neighbor's mail. And so I texted him the other day, speaking of SMS,
Yeah.
75 years old, and he'd prefer to text back and forth than jump on the phone. So anyways, I texted him the other day. I'm like, hey, I got your tax bill or whatever it is. And he's like, great. Couldn't you have gotten all the political mail too?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
I'm like, yeah, the one thing that made it to his inbox was the political mail, their mailbox. But yeah, to your point is that I think these things are going to come and go. And I do think that over time, SMS probably will become less effective
Right.
as it is now.
I will say they're like, it is really hard to get a phone number
Yeah.
to send mass messaging.
Yeah.
So if you're sending to 20 of your closest friends, not that hard. You're
Or you
sending
have a
to,
smaller business, or
right. You
you're
got
you're
300, 3,000 people.
depending on the niche you're in, right? Like if you're selling marijuana, you're not getting a text message
No.
through, right? Like if you're selling crypto, you're not getting a text message
No, and
through, right? But there's certain things like that.
Yeah. Trying to do gambling, gonna be hard.
Yeah, gonna be hard.
But
But for the vast majority of businesses, right? Like the ability to build a list, send them a text, let them know you have a special sale going on, let them know you have this going on.
I mean, I'm
Like
subscribed to a cereal brand, for God's
Yeah.
sake. It's a high protein, gluten free,
Well,
whatever cereal brand that I get text messages from.
Well, it's interesting. Like we use a lot of Duluth trading stuff.
Yeah.
And Duluth does a great job, right?
By the way, you
wanna-
should totally buy some Duluth.
Yeah,
if
by
you're
the
out
way.
there.
Yeah, it's
listening.
great stuff. And this is not sponsored by Duluth Trading.
Yet.
Yeah. But you want to see some of these companies that do a good job. Duluth is one of those that does a really good job.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a few companies that are.
I think
doing
Johnson and Murphy is another
Yep,
one,
they
another
do a great
clothing
job.
brand, but
Yeah, exactly. But, but at the end of the day, so Duluth might text me sometimes once a day
yeah.
on some special they have this or there. Can't tell you how much stuff I bought that I wouldn't have otherwise, simply because they were 30% off or this or that, and everybody wants, like, it doesn't bother me when I see those text messages, because if I don't want that, I'm like, oh, I don't need Duluth socks.
Yeah.
Right. Like I just ignore it. But when they're like, hey, these pants are on sale that we know you buy and they're 25% off, I actually want that message.
Yeah.
Because otherwise in 2 weeks when I go to buy them and I pay full price, I'm irritated.
I'll tell you a funny story. So, same thing. It's Duluth, and it was like August or whatever. And they sent me a text message, and I had just ran through my clean pants, and the only one I had left was my winter. They've got like, fleece lines.
yeah.
So, cause it gets a little chilly out here.
Yeah.
But I realized I was like, hey, I put a hole in one of my pairs, and they're a little pricey.
Yep.
Like they're not cheap, but they're great. And so literally maybe like 2 or 3 hours later, I got a text from them. Same thing, like 45% off pants. And I went in August and bought 3 pairs of winter pants.
Yep.
And that's where you don't know what the pain level
Exactly.
or experience of that person is, because they probably thought like, great, he's gonna buy the normal, like no chain,
Yeah.
don't cut off your leg with a chainsaw pants. And
Yeah.
I went and got their winter pants. And like, if they had
Exactly. You actually appreciated, number one, getting the message,
yeah,
because you didn't pay full price,
Yep.
like you would have when you went to buy it at a different time. And number two, in their case, they made more money because they happen to send you a text message today instead of going, well, we don't want to bother them. Like it's August. Like we'll send it next week.
Yeah.
Like,
I want to talk a little bit too on like, how do you avoid becoming a pest?
okay.
And one of the big things is I talked about changing up your angle, changing up whatever. You've got a lot of tools in your toolbox. And even though like you only have a smaller amount of characters, you're like I said, you're not going to pontificate on a text, right? 2, 3, 4 lines at the
Yep.
most. But you can tap into different types of messaging. And, we were talking about this the other day. Like you have relational messaging. Hey, it's Cody. Whatever I want to tell you next.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You're not just a robot that sent a message, right?
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
hey, it's Cody, blah, blah, blah. If you have relational equity, that's an upside, right? If
Yep.
if you don't have relational equity, don't do that. Because then
Yeah.
they're gonna be like, this guy again, screw this guy. Right.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
you have the relational side. You have some of these command or authority angles. Today, now, stop, right? Like you can use authority or command to try to tap into again, if you're out on the ranch and you're in the middle of a project, right? And you see if you're like you look quickly and you see stop, chances are you're probably going to stop, right? Same thing on the relational side. Please is a huge word that has a lot of like deep rooted command to it,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like when you hear please,
Or
people
can you do me a favor?
yes, yeah, like people have something that a gap they need to fill when they hear that word or
Yep.
that phrase. And like the command authority, again, if you do stop and then you have some stupid thing,
Yeah, exactly.
it destroys some of your command or your authority. But if you have it and it's an important thing and it increases your authority with that person, right? Credibility, authority, whatever you want to call it. And then you have there's so many different angles you can take at, and that's why so often you'll see people use it almost as like I know we were talking about as a good example in discount, but your SMS isn't a discount factor, right? Like the most urgent thing you can tell your customer usually isn't that you're having a sale, right? The most urgent thing you can talk to your customer, your lead, whatever about is the pain,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
deficit,
Yeah.
what the gap
About
between
them.
where they're at and where they want to be, all of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, sale is about you,
yeah,
right?
we're doing
Talk about them.
we're having, right?
Yeah.
Versus, like if you're in the fitness space, you could say like, hey, we're about to start our 6-week body burn program. Do you want to join? Right? Or like,
Yeah.
do you want to get your summer body in the next 6 weeks? But whatever, I'm not a
Yeah.
fitness guy. So, but my point is
No, but
like,
yeah, exactly.
that you're not saying our fitness
And what's
program is
cool-
10% off or whatever.
Yeah, and what's cool is when you do something like that, you can turn around the next day and say our fitness program's 10% off, and they're two entirely different messages
Yep.
coming out of the same company, but hitting people differently, so they don't feel like 3 days in a row you're like, hey, we're 10% off. Oh, we're 12% off. Oh, we're 15% off. Right?
Yeah.
Like you hit them with different messaging so that you attack different people, because some of us, I used to say it all the time. I'm like, ultimately, you sell the way somebody wants to buy, right?
Yeah.
And so some people want to listen to a 60-minute spiel on a webinar and buy. Some people want to jump on with the sales guy for 20 minutes and buy.
Yeah.
Some people like me just want to read the damn thing.
Yep.
And skim through what it is and buy.
Yeah. Read
right?
a transcript or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So some people want to listen to the audio, right?
Yep.
There's podcasts, right? Like there's all kinds of different ways that people absorb information and ultimately make purchasing decisions.
Yeah.
And so the more of those ways you can use, and SMS being one of them, and then take your SMS and go, okay, well, excuse me, guys, can I drive it to a live event, right? Can I drive them to a VSL? Can I drive them into a sales guy to ask a question, right? What can I do in those areas? And then that's what I'm trying to do. Like ultimately I want them to either click a link or pick up the phone or respond, right? To a sales guy. Then how do I get that to do it? Well, now, okay, it can be about them. It could be about their pain. It could be about the future. It could be about the past. It could be about regret. It could be about you just go through all those areas to accomplish the same goal as you work them across.
So I use this. I'll leave you with this analogy. If you're considering SMS, whatever, most people imagine like the vehicle is the thing. So I tell my team, I'm like, look, SMS isn't the arrow that tries to hit the bullseye, right? SMS is a specific thing, which then becomes a shotgun, right? Which is like you have one narrow thing, and if you only message one thing, that's a narrow message.
Yep.
A narrow vehicle, a narrow message. If you try to shoot an arrow and just hit the bullseye, you'll get one every time, right? Versus if you use the shotgun, like you can go and, like I said, you can do a relational message. The message is where the power is in SMS.
Yep.
Not like the vehicle has value.
Yeah, exactly.
But
right. Like it's just like the post office truck. He's got 100,000 letters in there.
Yep.
Right. The who gives a shit about the post office truck? Give a shit about the 100,000 letters. Right. The sales guy has one guy and one phone number.
Yep.
So he's using arrows.
Yeah.
Because he has no choice.
But when he's on the phone, he's using a shotgun because he's hitting their pain points from different angles, right?
Yeah.
The messaging he's using is dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. He's using different messaging to figure out what's about them.
Exactly.
Right? But it's still one-on-one relational messaging. Right?
And
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. Whereas SMS is like, okay, you have one phone number that you're sending out.
Yeah.
And you have one message. But
yeah, but like this one could be regret, right? That hits
Exactly.
a certain segment of the audience. This one could be fear of missing out, right? Which is a big one right now with the market going where it's at.
Opportunity.
Opportunity, exactly. Lost, right? Like loss, gain,
Yeah.
greed, fear,
And
like all those different things.
And like I said too, like it's getting harder and harder to get met like certain types of numbers, right? Like a short code is painful.
Yep.
Right. But there are other types of numbers. And the fact is that like there are simple ways you can start messaging your customers and increase your impact.
Exactly.
And
which is the whole point of this message.
Right.
Right. Like,
and SMS is the vehicle. It doesn't replace the quality of the marketing.
Well put. I think that's as good a spot as any to, like, we could talk about SMS for another 45 minutes and give you 35 more examples. But I think at this stage of the game, I think we hit on the points that we wanted to, which is if you're not using SMS, we believe you should, because it's just going to get harder and harder to get in the inbox and to send emails and to do all those things. And then in doing anything, right, when you first start doing it, you're probably not going to do great at it, right? Just figure it out, work through it, figure out, okay, well, how do I get people on the list? How do I get them to engage? Don't have this fear of screwing it up. Just assume you're probably going to screw it up to begin with and just work your way through it.
Yeah. I just wanted to make the case. I can't tell you how many business owners or just marketers I talk to, and it's the same story. Either that doesn't work for us or it's just not worth it. And the fact is, it probably is worth it.
It is. I mean, let's just finish with this one example. We talked about Duluth Trading today, right? There's another company that I get text messages from on a regular basis called Smart Equine, which does a lot of our horse stuff. But at the end of the day, I probably buy 50. I have 50 different vendors on this ranch. 2 of them send me text messages.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that are on top of mind right now on what's going on. And even though Smart Equine, I might buy twice a year from them, right? It's something I need. These other ones, I need them on a much more regular basis, pool chemicals or whatever else is necessary. And if they would send me a text message, number one, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah.
Because then I don't have to go search them out. And number two, when I actually need something and I go in to purchase, 9 times out of 10, I'm purchasing at the wrong time or in the wrong environment for what's going on.
Yeah.
If I could figure it out, like Amazon figured out on auto ship, right? Like, I think that they all could use text messaging and ultimately, if I don't want it, don't make the assumption I don't want it for me. Right? Send me a text message and let me say stop.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm telling you guys, it's worth it. Awesome. It really is.
All right. Thanks, Cody. Appreciate the input on SMS, and we'll see you guys on the flip side.
See you next week.